What were you saying, Alejandro?
I am not important. I don't need to talk. It is not about me. It's about we preserving and celebrating. Right?
Yes, it is, Alejandro. Alejandro,
I love our community.
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 Hi, I'm Josh Weston, Editor-in-Chief of State of the Ozarks.
And this is Dale Grubaugh. I'm publisher of State of the Ozarks, sitting in for Ethan Grubaugh.
And we are behind the scenes on podcast night.
Yes, well, I'm behind the mic.
Oh, I'm behind a scene. It's a scene inside my own mind. And Alejandro is here.
See?
Yes, I see.
I see you, Dale. Of State of the Ozarks. You should join my mutiny.
We haven't been drinking, I promise.
62
Oh, hail the dillo. Oh, hail the dillo.
A brass armadillo.
Oh, so we've got the room down, so we're ready to go, right? Whenever y'all ready. Whenever we're ready. Welcome to the State of the Ozarks podcast. This is Josh Heston, Editor-in-Chief.
And this is Dale Grubaugh. I am publisher of State of the Ozarks, setting in for the fabulous Ethan Grubaugh.
Who happens to be your son.
Yes.
And we're talking about our Ozarks.
Your community.
And this episode of Been Thinking About has been brought to you by
Stafford's Barbershop and Shave Company, the place for men.
Shepherd the Musical, rediscovering America's story.
And Taney County Health Department, creating opportunities for healthy lives in our community.
That's some good folks right there.
Yes, they are. All of them.
Every single three of them.
That's right.
We're gonna add some more here pretty soon.
Oh, good.
Because we're on iTunes.
Yes, we are on iTunes. So if you want to be in the podcast, you want to support the podcast, do it.
Want to support our endeavors, State of the Ozarks endeavors, based here in Hollister, Missouri, to build community and to have a good time.
Yes.
We do have a good time.
We do have a good time.
Even with the armadillo.
Yes.
Alejandro the armadillo, the mascot of the State of the Ozarks Been Thinking About podcast. And we have a lot of armadillos around.
We do.
We usually only
Way too many.
We usually just see them on the side of the road, but
well, we won't talk about that.
but let's talk about this weekly.
Yes, sir.
We've got quite a bit to talk about. We've got my editorial, and then we have you've got the list.
Yes, well, I've got the list here. We've got an article that's written by you about one of our favorite hillbillies, Don Bilyeu.
I take that back. It's not written by me.
Oh, okay.
It's
not.
Gideon.
It's by Gideon Pellegrino. Sorry, Gideon. You can edit that out, right?
A lot of the stuff on State of the Ozarks is written by me. So, but no, this was a big piece by Gideon.
Yes, it was.
By Don Bilyeu. But let's start with the editorial, because I want to get your thoughts on this mindset, Ozarkian, Appalachian, hillbilly mindset.
Okay.
And of course, as Ethan and I were talking on the Facebook video last night, the dignity, even nobility of Ozarkers is something that certainly he's well aware of, because he grew up in the Ozarks. I did not grow up in the Ozarks, but I've got, of course, half of my family comes from that sensibility. And it is, of course, we're also coming off of the celebration of the Celtic Festival of Light, which precedes Groundhog Day, Imbolg, spelled Imbolg, and celebrating some of our Celtic heritage. And I think that the heritage of the Celts, the sensibility of the Celts, really ties into what has become known as hillbilly culture.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfectly good sense to me. I call myself a hillbilly. I grew up in the river country of the Ozarks, and
when you say river country, for folks who don't know, where is that?
It's in the Crawford County, Gasconade County, Dent County area. That encompasses the Burbus River, the Merrimack River, and
Up there by St. James in
up
Cuba.
by St. James in Cuba, Rolla, in that area. Yeah.
And that is, I think, we'll digress a little bit here, but let's talk about this. When a lot of people talk about the Ozarks, they don't really know where the Ozarks are. And we've talked a lot about that. It's been something that I sat down with maps and geological maps and everything 11 years ago to try to figure out. So our definition of the Ozarks sometimes is cultural, sometimes is geological or topographical, and you're essentially talking about on a north and south axis from Jefferson City, Missouri, on the Missouri River, down to nearly to Little Rock, Arkansas, and then on an east-west axis, we're stretching from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, the foothills, the far western foothills of the Ozarks, all the way to the Mississippi River and Cape Girardeau or St. Genevieve.
Yes.
And
It's a big place.
it is a really big place. It is certainly large enough to be its own state, hence the term state of the Ozarks.
Yeah.
And there's a lot here. There's a lot of culture, but there's certainly that. I think what I was striving at for the editorial article was, what is a hillbilly?
Well, a hillbilly, of course, is somebody that we consider having been raised here, in the Ozark area, an Ozark hillbilly. But a hillbilly is an individual who's very proud, who has a lot of common sense, that knows how to live off the land. And as you say in your article, that we're hard to trust people. We're suspicious of change. We're suspicious of government. We're suspicious of newcomers. And interesting, when I moved actually into Stone County.
Yes.
Stone
County, Missouri.
Stone County, Missouri. It took me a little while to convince some of the native folks, that I was actually, one of them.
Even though an Ozarker.
Yeah, I was
a hillbilly.
Ozark native. But since I didn't actually, grow up in the area, they didn't actually know my family for a long time. I was, viewed as being an outsider.
An outsider.
Yeah.
And let's talk about this a little bit. This isn't specifically dealing with these articles, but you came down here. You came down to Stone County and Stone and Taney County being directly impacted by the development of Table Rock Lake, beginning in 1959 when the lake went in. And you came down here in the 70s.
Yes.
In the mid-70s. And I think there's, of course, now we're 40 years later. We're, in many cases where newcomers have been here for a couple of generations, quote unquote. But tell us about that experience. What was the strata? What was the demographic that you were dealing with? The people here, they're, in some cases, have been there the whole lives. In some cases, disrupted by the lake. In some cases, they were there because of the lake.
Yes. Well, the area in which I lived, which was on the south side of Table Rock Lake, probably had more native people in its demographic than many of the other regions around the lake. And there were families there that had literally been farming their farms, since the turn of the century. A lot of century farms, even though they wouldn't have ever labeled it that way, and these folks, they were hospitable, but they were hard. It was hard to get them to trust you, because they saw that as an outsider. Of course, a lot of them saw the lake, and the tourist industry as an infringement upon their lives. Like you said, some of these people, some of their families lost their farms.
Yes.
Lost their homes and lost everything because of Table Rock Lake being put in. They lost, even something more precious than that. They've lost family graveyards. Family graves were taken, and so there was a lot of I don't want to say hostility, but there was a lot of resentment yet. Even though when I came in, it was 20 years after the lake had actually developed. there was still a lot of hard feeling there, and
That's understandable.
yeah,
It really is.
it really is.
And of course, you were also interacting with people who were there because of the
Yes.
lake development. What
Yes.
was that like?
Oh, well, it was interesting because a lot of the people that I interacted with were resort owners, who had come down from the cities, Chicago, St. Louis, New York, whatever. They wanted to come and live in the Ozarks. They bought themselves a resort on that side of the lake, and they were just going to have, life wonderful. They came, usually from a lot of money, but after they bought the resorts, they didn't have a whole lot, and they learned that, that living in the Ozarks was not easy,
Started to learn what everybody else already knew.
Yes, that these hills can eat you if you're not careful.
And I think there's a number of people who found the same thing out about Branson. Just gonna throw that out there.
Probably from a different aspect, but yeah. The tourist industry, which was a big industry on that side of the lake for us, and I say tourist because of the resorts and the fishing and things like that. And there were some other venues that came in, but it proved to be a tough life, and there was a lot of them who weren't prepared for it. They made it through a season or two, and then by the time the second or third winter came along and there was no business and no money coming in and the bills kept coming in, it was tough. I remember one gentleman, they bought a resort, and he finally came to me and he said, after their second winter there, he says, I've got to go find a job. If not, I'm going to lose everything I've got, And he did. He came over here to Branson, and he got a job with the Public Works Department, at the water plant, and he worked there, until he passed away, But, yeah, it was an eye-opening experience for them.
So coming back to one of our favorite hillbillies,
Yeah.
which is, of course, the subject of Gideon Pellegrino's story, is Don Bilyeu. Really, it's the story of Don and Shirley.
Yeah.
Don and Shirley Bilyeu. And it's one of the reasons I was excited to have you on the podcast tonight, because you've known Don for a long time.
Yes, I have. I've been his pastor now for almost 24 years, but my history with Don and Shirley Bilyeu goes back way beyond that. When I was pastoring a church over at Highlandville, Don worked at one of the service stations there, and Shirley had a beauty shop there. So he would pump my gas and check my oil, and she would curl my hair, literally. And we became vast friends, that. And then later on, but he, native of this area, born and raised on Bull Creek, and somehow won the heart of this girl from around Neosho, Missouri, and they got together and made a life on Bull Creek, and now they still live on a creek, but it's the Finley River instead of Bull Creek. They're still on a creek. Yeah.
And of course, we want people to read the article, but I want to ask you, because it's hard to define, what is it about Don that resonates? Because he is such a profound man.
He is. One of the things that I've always appreciated about Don Bilyeu is that he has never met a stranger. And even if he doesn't like a person from the onset, he will not let you know that. He kind of keeps that to himself. Now, he may never talk to you again, sorry, Don, but you would never know that there was a dislike. But on the other side of that, too, you don't have to guess at where Don stands in a relationship with friends or anywhere. I mean, he'll tell you what is on his heart, but he'll not do it in a hateful way, Right. But he's just very open, very plain, one of the hardest working men I've ever seen. He's 80-some years old and still goes out and takes care of the cows every day, puts up hay in the summertime, works the garden, builds the fences. He just cuts wood. He just working. He works.
He's a good man.
Yep. And then, of course, very supportive of his church, very supportive of his family, very supportive of his wife. just and he tells you, he says, I'm a hillbilly. You know, I am a hillbilly. And when you get to know him, there's no doubt that you're right. He's a hillbilly, but he's not a simple man.
No, not at all. And I think it bears a little bit of discussion. True hillbillies, they're not Southerners, and they're not Northerners.
Mm-hmm.
They're not Midwestern farm families. They're not Deep South folks. They're also not rednecks.
That's right.
And there is something very noble
Mm-hmm.
about the people, the real bedrock people
Mm-hmm.
of the Ozarks. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the same thing about Mr. Britton.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know if Mike and Don know each other, but I would sure like for them to get to know each other before too long. You know,
The world might never be the same.
it may not be.
We'll see what we can do about that.
Mm-hmm.
But that, of course, leads us to another person,
Mm-hmm.
another hillbilly from your past,
Yes.
and your family, and that's the other story,
Yes.
which is the story of Aunt Pena.
Aunt Pena.
And of course, it's not spelled that way.
Nope. It's spelled Pena.
Pena.
Pena. And her name was Pena Ringeisen. But everybody knew her as Peony.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where that came from. But she, of all the colorful characters that have graced my life, she is probably one of the most colorful that I can think of. I met Aunt Pena. Well, she wasn't my aunt when I met her, but I met her early one morning in June of probably 64, 65, somewhere in that area. I was spending my annual fishing vacation with my Aunt Mildred and Uncle Sidney over on the Burbus River, and that's what we did. My Aunt Mildred and I, we fished. You know, when we weren't working the gardens, we fished. But this one particular morning, she announced that we was going to have somebody come over and go fishing with us. One of their neighbors was coming, and I was kind of anxious about it a little bit, you know, because we'd never had anybody go fishing with us before that wasn't family, you know. And so pretty soon that morning she says, well, here comes Peony. And I look down the road and I'm going, what in the world is that? You know, and
how old were you?
I was probably about 6, 7, maybe 8 at the oldest at this point, you know, and here comes this creature, you know, walking down the road, striding like a man, and had these big mud boots on, had an aviator's cap on her head with the flaps down, you know, and her cat-eyed glasses, you know, on her big strawberry nose. She had a flannel shirt on, a pair of men's pants, and a calico dress. You know, and she was and she had the poles in her hand, and they were just a flopping, and she was just a swinging her arms and just a walking, you know, and I'm going, oh my gosh, you know, I don't know, is that a Peony? What's a Peony? You know, but anyway, she finally got to the house, came into the house, and the moment she saw me, she just started talking. She's talked to me like she'd known me all of her life, and we immediately became very fast friends. You know, she lived in a little shack, and if you look at the article, you'll see one of the pictorial plates there. There's still her home that she lived on the river still stands, and it's still sided in the asphalt siding that was there.
That old shingle siding.
Yeah, that old shingle siding, and you know, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But it's, you know, nothing fancy, but that's what she called home. She was very superstitious. Of course, she had a lot of German heritage.
Right, and of course, German heritage mixes freely into that north edge of the Ozarks between St. Louis and Jefferson City.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And of course, that's part of your heritage.
Yeah, part of my heritage.
Mr. Grubau.
Mr. Grubau, yeah, Grubau. But she was just an absolute sweetheart to me. You know, she taught me a lot about fishing. That very first day, she had a John boat, and that's one of the reasons why we went with her, because Aunt Mildred didn't have a boat, but Peony did. And so she had an old wooden john boat down there and had oars on it. And she made me learn how to row the boat, you know, and I had to row the boat. Because she said, you know, if a man was going to go fishing, he needed to learn how to maneuver the boat and how to row the boat and take care of things. And, you know, so I did. But, man, many a summer, you know, was spent fishing with her and with Aunt Mildred, and, of course, then later on Uncle Jones. And I just had a great time. She was a sweetheart. Superstitious, oh, my gosh. You know, and it was like, if she had an itch in her palm, that means she's going to get money. You know, if her nose itched, and it was a big nose to itch, but, you know, that meant that she was going to get company coming. She dropped a fork, well, that was the direction in which the company was coming from, you know. And there were, I mean, just list of them, you know, the salt on the table, throw it over your shoulder, just all kinds of things, you know. And I just marveled at it, but it was her way of life, you know. It was just absolutely her way of life. And one of the things, you know, about it, she was a hard-working woman. She took care of her livestock. She took care of her hogs, her cows, her chickens. You know, she didn't have anybody else to do that for her. She did it herself, and she, you know, even after she became my great aunt when she married my Uncle Jones, you know, the two of them worked hand in hand together. You know, on the farm, you know, first in the filling station, but then on the farm, you know, and they both got out there and worked the cows and did everything, you know.
It was a good life, wasn't it?
It was a very good life. Very good life.
Of course, we got to go up and actually take photos of a lot of this, and those are the photos that ultimately are in the article.
Yes.
In the article today, that was a cold sunny day.
It was
on the Burbus River.
It was,
and of course it was Hog Trough Road, Hog Trough Bridge. Aunt Penny's place is still standing, or was when we were up there taking photos.
I was by there back in the fall, and it's still there.
It's still there. It's beautiful country.
It is,
with a lot of heritage, a lot of American heritage. I think a lot of German heritage, a lot of Irish heritage, Celtic heritage, and that brings us to the recipe. Now, not every recipe, not that we publish in State of the Ozarks Weekly, do we make, but in this case we did.
Yes, in fact we made it first and then published
it.
Yes.
You found it. Of course, it's in a cookbook that my sister got me for Christmas. But you found it. It's called Dublin Coddle.
Yes.
And what'd you think of that? I know what I thought of it. It was amazing. But
I loved it, and because I've always liked Dublin Coddle.
Yes.
And that's the actual name of the stew soup. And I'd had it at some of the local restaurants and kind of liked it. I saw it and I thought, well, you know, this is something I'd like to try. And of course, I made it, and I don't mean to insult any of the cooks around here in the restaurants, but my Dublin Coddle was better than anything that I have ever purchased from anywhere else. Sorry, guys.
It lived up. It lived up to every expectation and exceeded it. And I think everybody who was here for the podcast recording enjoyed it.
Yes.
As well. So that's a doer againer.
Yes, it is. And I would highly recommend that you, you know, if you're listening or watching, check it out, and don't be afraid to make it. It is comfort food like you would not believe.
It is.
You know, you do need to pair it with some hard bread or some soda bread. You know, good Irish soda bread or biscuits. You know, but man, it's good stuff.
And of course, to get those recipes, they need to be on the weekly.
Yes.
And you can sign up for the weekly. It's free. State of the Ozarks email. Go to stateoftheozarks.net and sign up in the box. Super easy. And of course, further, to learn more, visit us on stateoftheozarks.net.
Okay, or sign up for the State of the Ozarks weekly email.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
And like State of the Ozarks on Facebook.
Follow at Soto Media on Twitter.
Subscribe to Soto Media on YouTube.
And follow us on Instagram at State of the Ozarks.
Thank you for listening to Been Thinking About, the State of the Ozarks podcast with Josh.
And Dale sitting in for Ethan.
And this is our Ozarks.
Your community.
Awesome.
Was it okay?
Yeah.
It was wonderful. The coddle cuddled my soul. It was so good. You don't need to get a weekly and make it. It is so good. It was so good for your soul. Seriously. Dale is an amazing cook, and he blesses my Dillo belly.
Night, guys.
Night.